Hello and welcome to the American Recut. I'm here with Brendan.
Hello. And I'm here with Nick.
No, you're not.
Then who am I with?
Don't you wish you knew? We're here to talk about a series of unfortunate events. After the Baudelaire parents die in a terrible fire, the Baudelaire orphans search for their family's secrets and get them and their fortune away from the terrible grasp of the sinister Count Olaf as he moves with them between different guardians in disguise. A series of unfortunate events was developed by Mark Hudis and Barry Sonnenfeld, originally written by Lemony Snicket with help from Daniel Handler. So after that vain and futile delivery of an introduction, what did you think of A Series of Unfortunate Events?
It was gripping. I mean, I'm not usually one to binge, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. I had to keep finding out what happens next.
All right. I would say that I also thought it was very good. Very good. I particularly appreciate the acting of a few of the adult cast members.
Yeah.
I'm not always crazy about some of the liberties they take with technology and the child actors, but overall, it's a strong series. It finishes strong, and I recommend it.
I strongly recommend it as well. I'm not sure if it follows the book.
You would have to read the book first.
I would have to read the book, but well, you read the book.
I did read the book, and I know that you watched the film.
I did.
All right. Now, I think that's going to be the only part of this that is spoiler-free. Frankly, it is impossible to talk about this series without getting into some of the spoilers, where the plot goes, and talking about some of the deeper mysteries that kind of unravel as you watch the series. Let's talk about VFD!
Let's talk about VFD, the secret organization that seems to permeate the entire series.
That's right. Known as the Volunteer Firefighters Department, they are the secret organization that helps to tie together most of the series and some of the mysteries that surround the Baudelaires and their parents. It is essentially kind of a spy network, I want to say, kind of a very undercover method of dealing with social injustices and promoting goodwill towards the world. They're actually pretty vague about what they do in VFD.
Right. I mean, it does look like a pretty ragtag bunch, but I mean, they're all there for a common good, you know? I mean, like you said, fight for social justice, promote strength through knowledge and stuff like that.
Right. And with that, I do want to get into the first question of this, because as you noted, and as I mentioned as well, with VFD in particular, it delves into one of the central themes of the entire show, if you ask me, which is the idea that people either have good intentions and don't act, or have terrible intentions and act brashly.
Right.
Which is what most characters, both in the show and the books and the movie, all kind of get divided into ultimately.
Right. And, well, it's like you said, I mean, the VFD, they're very noble, but they often let their noble code kind of obstruct their line of thinking. And everyone's line of thinking is just essentially obstructed by either with their sense of duty or their sense of self. I mean, they're ultimately just ineffective at helping these kids.
Yeah, and that is one of the recurring themes of the entire show, is the ineffectiveness of the Guardians versus the surprising effectiveness of their villains.
Right.
And this comes up every single time. So what I would like to do for this one, since there's not that much to discuss as far as quality, and there are a few things that we'll talk about as we get to them, but I'd kind of like to do a bit of a retrospective on the series as a whole, and just kind of do a walkthrough of each of the episodes, talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, and that kind of thing. So let's start with the bad beginning. It is indeed the pilot episode for this series is also the first book of the series, where Violet, Claus, and Sonny Baudelaire find out that their parents are dead from a distressing banker and are sent to live with their guardian, Count Olaf, who, as you probably know, is a recurring villain throughout the series.
And on a side note, this just to personally vent, I am exasperated by that banker. I mean...
Mr. Poe?
Yes. It's one thing for him to fall for Olaf's tricks once or twice, but it's a pattern, and he never picked up on that pattern. He never caught on. The only thing he ever caught was a sickness, which... Did they ever specify what that was?
He just has a cough.
Which is how he always announces himself.
But yeah, this is also where we get introduced to a lot of the core, I think, core thematic elements of the series, which is people who are nice enough but ineffective.
Right. They have noble intentions, but they always get distracted, either with themselves or with their sense of duty.
Now, let's get into a little bit of criticism for a moment here. I think that this is the first time that we see our child actors who are going to be staying with over the entire series. Violet, Claus, and Sunny, who are, of course, played respectively by Melina Weissman for Violet Baudelaire, Louis Hines for Claus Baudelaire, and Presley Smith playing Sunny Baudelaire.
And voiced by...
And of course, Sunny is also voiced by Tara Strong, surprisingly enough.
That was a bombshell.
That one surprised me too. Yeah, I really did not expect to see her name pop up
Right?
with this. And of course, let's also take a side note, mention, yes, Neil Patrick Harris is Count Olaf. Yes, he's wonderful. Yes, he is perfectly fitting for the character. But people have said enough about him.
I do want to say one thing. It's nice to see NPH play something...
NPH.
Hey, it's nice to see him out of that suave pretty boy role, you know, the one that we see in his beer commercials and or
yes.
How I Met Your Mother. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to talk about Doogie Howard.
That too. It's nice to see him break from that usual role and do something that we don't normally see him in.
And I think that over the years, as he's had more and more roles and has kind of really become one of the central actors of Hollywood, if you will, one of the sillier actors,
right,
kind of taking Jim Carrey's place, I think he's gotten enough roles and diversity that he has had these kinds of roles before. And he, of course, does well here. That's really all I'm going to say about him. He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's definitely come into those shoes quite well.
But another person who doesn't get nearly enough respect for what he did is Patrick Warburton as Lemony Snicket.
That surprised
wonderful.
me. Yeah.
He is absolutely wonderful in the role.
He did well. You know, I mean, again, we always see him in such rambunctious roles. He's always that loud guy, loud, tough guy. But he was very calm and composed. He was a great choice.
Composed, of course, is a phrase which here means speaking slowly and surely, but in a way that's also respectful of the audience's lack of knowledge in certain fields.
Right.
But yeah, the criticism I was going to get to is that, in particular, we have Melina Weissman, who is a little bit of a sore note in the series, and that doesn't quite ever get fixed. She always comes across as a little bit disinterested, a little bit bland. I was never crazy about her over the series.
See, I never took her as bland. You know, I mean, I thought both child actors played the role of disillusioned orphans very well. You know, I mean, just I thought they did a good job.
I think they did a good enough job where it's not super distracting, but it's nothing special. And I know that Melina in particular has something of a habit with these roles where she does give a very muted performance. And of course, Presley Smith. Who does she think she is?
Oh, yeah. Jesus.
Where does she get off with this diva performance?
The audacity.
The audacity. Anyway, so...
That's right. Not even a baby is safe from our critique.
Nothing is. Now, in the first episode, of course, this is also when we have Count Olaf launching his first plan, which is to marry Violet Baudelaire in a miserable marriage. And it's ultimately Klaus and Violet that succeed in thwarting his plan to marry her, of course.
Right. And this was in the movie, too, so, I mean, we should all be pretty familiar with how the whole...
It was in the movie, it was in the book,
Yeah.
It's been in every adaptation. We know how this part goes.
Yeah.
But it's worth still taking some time to go over it, just to note that this is also one of the most innocent plots that happens in the whole series.
Yeah. Innocent enough.
I mean, yeah, this is underage marriage, potential rape, and this is easily the most muted, subtle plan that Count Olaf ever comes up with. There's no weapons, there's no absolute threats of violence. This is very much played up straight up to the books as well. This is where the series basically is in line with the books, save for a song or two by Neil Patrick Harris that he gets in this episode.
Yeah.
Because he just had that musical number. And there are some things that get changed, like the spy scope, which never showed up in the books.
What never showed up in the books?
The spy scope
Oh, really?
never showed up in the books. Claus never had that.
Wow. Okay. I always took it as a central plot device, but
Justice Strauss also did not have the incomplete history of secret organizations in her library in the books.
really, so that scope and that book never
Well,
existed.
The book existed, but Justice Strauss didn't have a copy.
Okay. Interesting. Huh.
And basically, if you've seen the movies, if you've read the books, if you've even watched this, you know how the beginning goes. Everyone knows the bad beginning, I think.
How true is the series to the book?
Mostly true of the book. There's a few changes for the better, I find, in the series.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. There's one thing I almost forgot too, is that through the first season, we have the running narrative of the Baudelaire parents timeline, where we have cutaways to their parents.
Oh, that, yeah.
So that is a major departure from the books, which only works if you haven't seen the movies or read the books. Basically, if you're a new viewer, it actually comes across pretty well as the side story with the parents. But I think that with the thwarting of a lost plan, that leads us into the second book, where they go to a new guardian, which is the reptile room.
Oh, okay. That was book 2. Okay.
That was also episode 2.
Okay. So.
Well, episode 3, but they're two-parters.
Okay. So. The reptile room. Go ahead. You were gonna say something.
So with the reptile room, we have the children going to live with their Uncle Montgomery.
Every time with that name. Who, by the way, Dr. Montgomery was played by the also very talented Asif Manvi. I was very happy to see him in this series. I recognize him from Jon Stewart's show, The Daily Show.
Oh.
It was nice to see a familiar face.
He is absolutely wonderful in this as well. He is definitely one of the shining moments of season 1, is his portrayal as Uncle Montgomery.
This name. Anyway.
So the kids find themselves in this reptile mansion for the herpetologist. And this is the series where we introduce the very common tropes of every single episode following it, which is the kids get introduced to the new home, they find themselves in wonder with their new guardian, and they discover the eccentricities of their guardian as well. In this case, it's the incredibly deadly viper, which of course is a misnomer.
And which they define as a name that's purposely misleading or wrong?
Something like that.
Something like that.
It's the running joke of the series.
It is. It really is.
But yeah, we're introduced to that kind of thing, and then of course we will always have Count Olaf show up in disguise as someone who has very loose reasons for existing within the same home as the Baudelaires. In this case, he shows up as an assistant sent from some herpetologist guild or something.
Yeah, some chapter or so. I don't know. I mean, it was very loosely fabricated, but yet he still bought it. Dr. Montgomery still bought it.
Well, no, he didn't. Uncle Money didn't. By for a second, he knew he was a spy.
Not from where he thought. Not.
Anyways, Uncle Monty takes the kids to the movies, and we get another change from the books, which is the coded message in the film, and the realization that Uncle Montgomery is also a member of VFD.
Okay, so answer me this: so if they didn't communicate via the scope, how did VFD members communicate in the books?
It's kept purposely vague.
Oh, okay. Ooh, okay, ambiguity.
Well, it was ambiguous in the books, but that's not relevant to the show, where they do have a lot more answers for VFD. And in general, the show concerns itself much more with VFD than the books ever did. Which, I'll get into that when we talk about the end and I'm terrible with the name of the second last episode. The penultimate peril.
Oh God, that's right.
But anyways, reptile room. Uncle Monty gets assassinated. We have a very brief moment where Olaf takes a look at a picture and says, "Well, of course it's a picture of us. We're all in the piano."
Right.
Which again is a lot of foreshadowing that wasn't in the books. Then Uncle Monty gets poisoned. They have a whole kind of detective thrillerish thing where each of the kids does their parts, and Count Olaf is discovered and run off again. This episode, this is my favorite episode of season 1. Well, it's favorite two-part of season 1, mostly because of the performance of the character Uncle Montgomery, but also because it's generally a very well shot, very well coordinated episode, which takes place in a few different environments. I like this episode a lot in season 1.
Yeah, and it kind of touches the rest of the series off, because then it just starts to become a little more formulaic from there on in. The kids move to a different guardian, and Olaf somehow trails them through another silly disguise.
All right, speaking of, let's touch on episode 3 real quick, because
Shoot.
Again, very similar setup. They go see their new guardian. They discover that the place is beautiful. They discover the quirk of the guardian, which is she's obsessed with safety. After her husband died tragically while helping BFD. And again, Count Olaf shows up. This time as Captain Sham, and this is by far my absolute favorite disguise he ever has.
Why is that?
Why is that? There's a good 15 minutes of the entire two-part episode where it is just him relaying how he met her, and him hanging out with Mr. Poe, and of course, one of my favorite comedic elements of the entire series, his story of how he lost his right leg.
Oh, that's right.
My left leg was not strong enough to save my right. But of course, as you might expect with the episode, the episode goes that the Baudelaires discover who he is. Basically, immediately, they try to find a way to thwart him. They take a boat out. They find Aunt Josephine, who they thought was dead. Turns out no. And then the Guardian, who finally believes the Baudelaires, gets killed by Count Olaf. I'd say for these episodes, the shining star is, without a doubt, Neil Patrick Harris as Captain Sham. He is just fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
This is also where you kind of get some of the more meta jokes from Sonny, which kind of feel forced, especially the Uber joke.
Yeah.
And this is my big hang-up on seasons 1 and 2, is that product placement feels much more obvious. You know that they're getting paid by someone to put this there. It doesn't feel good.
I agree. I mean, the jokes, I get their modern jabs, but they ultimately just confuse me, because I'm still trying to figure out what timeline they're even in. Because, they have television, they have old-timey phones with the cord, but...
And again, that's something where, as far as the books go, that is a departure, because the books were generally much more relaxed with how the inventions that they come up with work, especially the one from episode 1, the rock skipper machine, that doesn't show up for obvious reason. This is one of the innovations of Netflix series, is to have this more magical technology, which didn't bother me that much, but it does make the setting hard to pin down. Now, this is where the movies end, right?
Yes, thank you for reminding me.
So yeah, let's take a quick diversion, talk about the movies and the movie and how it relates to book, because I haven't seen the movie. I legitimately don't know.
See, now I never read the books, so essentially the movie seems to incorporate book 1, 2, and 3, but they split one in half, the first volume in half. So, because the wedding from book 1 seems to take place closer to the end of the movie, and they just end it there. I know that the book series was way longer than that, and I was hoping that it wasn't.
The book series is not long. Each book takes maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes to read.
Young adult lit novels, that's fair.
Yes.
How many volumes are there in total?
13.
Okay, so still, they only made a movie out of the first 3 books. I feel like, I was kind of denied, because they introduced the telescope in the movie, and they introduced the tattoo, but they never give us the name of the organization.
The tattoo is a carryover from the books, but the telescope, I did not know that was a carryover from the movies.
Oh yeah, that was in the movies, and they kind of left us hanging in the movie. They never gave us any detail as to what the tattoo is, how Count Olaf knew their parents, or how...
It's VFD.
Yeah, they didn't mention that. They didn't mention that. It was just so ambiguous, and I think they kind of, tried to follow the books in that regard, but I still would have preferred some closure. And the series did kind of give me that closure, but, a movie versus a TV series.
Oh, okay. So, I didn't know that the movie actually mixed the first 3 episodes. So, if you're someone that's watching straight off the heels of the movie, this is going to be very different.
Right.
Much different. Much slower.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, the movie itself is like a good 90 minutes, and it does have a talented cast. Meryl Streep, Jim Carrey, and Jude Law are in it. But, really, I mean, if you want more, like I said, closure or clarity as to what the hell's going on, I would recommend the TV series, Much better detailed, in my opinion.
Though I think the movie does have some jokes that work really well in it, if I remember right.
Oh, yeah. No, Neil Patrick Harris and Jim Carrey both play Olaf really well, in my opinion. Of course, Jim Carrey, being Jim Carrey, he's more zany than Neil Patrick Harris, but...
It's contractual.
It really is. I mean, it's...
His contract, not the director's.
And, no, and it's kind of his trademark as well, so... But like I said, I felt like they really left us hanging in the movie. And I feel like the TV show really did give me answers that I feel that the movie failed to answer, so.
Okay, good to know. So, would you recommend watching the movie first and then the series afterwards?
I would, actually. Just so that you could draw some compare and contrasts between Jim Carrey's Count Olaf versus Neil Patrick Harris's Count Olaf. And I personally prefer them both, but some people will say that, they prefer Neil Patrick Harris's version way more than the Jim Carrey version.
All right. I would also say here as well that if you've read the book series first, the show is very refreshing as far as that goes. It has some details that don't show up in the books. It has some unique stuff where it plays a lot with the ideas that are found in later books much earlier on in the series. And it has some pretty nice twists here and there that'll throw you a little bit if you read the books first.